The Mackin place cost me 63 grand at a county auction, and I signed the papers before I'd ever stepped over the threshold. I knew better, but the number was too good, and I told myself I'd seen enough from the road to get away with it. My name's Dennis. I flip houses in the dead spots between small towns in Ohio. Not the HGTV shit with a smiling couple and fake deadlines. Just me, my truck, a trailer, and whatever's falling apart out past the city limits. I buy cheap. I fix what matters. I don't get sentimental. It keeps the lights on. The Mackin place sat on 4 acres off a gravel road. The county stopped giving a shit about somewhere around Obama's second term. 2 stories, white clabbered swallowed by mildew, porch half rotted off like broken teeth. Earl Mackin died in there in 2019 with no kids and no will, and his taxes piled up until the county finally shook the cushions and dumped the property on the auction list. Everybody in Crofton knew the house. Nobody wanted it. I'd driven past it plenty of times. It was one of those landmarks you use giving directions. Turn left after the creepy farmhouse, that kind of thing. I never really looked at it close. I'd always figured the creepiness was just neglect and Midwest superstition. The only neighbor was a soybean operation half a mile east. I never saw people, just red and green machines crawling across the fields, slow and patient like bugs that lived forever. At night, if there were no clouds, you could see their work lights moving in the distance like low stars. I moved my trailer onto the property in early September, backed it in alongside what used to be a detached garage. Calling it a garage was generous. 3 walls, roof caved in on the 4th corner, raccoon shit everywhere. I cleared a space, rolled out an extension cord from the temporary panel the county made me put in, and called it my workshop. First walkthrough, the house wasn't as bad as I'd pictured from the road. Structurally, anyway, old limestone block foundation, tight mortar joints, thick oak framing that had probably seen 2 or 3 different roofs come and go. Somebody had slapped vinyl siding over the original clapboard sometime in the 90s, and that was starting to peel back like old tape. Roof was shot. Porch was a sponge. Plumbing looked like 2 or 3 generations of men had each taken a half-assed crack at fixing it and then died. The electrical was a mess of knob-in tube mixed with Romex. Standard old farmhouse bullshit. But the floors bothered me. The kitchen had a sag like somebody heavy had parked there and never moved. Not insane, not houses falling into a sinkhole level, but enough that when you walked from the hallway into the kitchen, you felt the slope under your boots. I felt it the first time and made a mental note. Water damage, I told myself. Old pipes leak, joist rot. Been there, fix that. I was 3 days in when I finally cut into the floor. The kitchen had this ugly yellowed sheet linoleum on top. It peeled up in greasy layers, like dead skin. Underneath was the original pine planking, wide boards turned almost black with age and heel oil, soft in spots where moisture had gotten at them. I found the lowest point with my level, marked out a rough square, and cut a 2-foot section with my circular saw. I pried it up and dropped to my knees, my weight on my palms, and pointed my flashlight down into what I assumed would be your standard 18-inch crawl space. My beam didn't hit dirt. It just kept going. At first I thought I was seeing things. The edges of the hole showed joists, sure enough, and the tops of concrete piers, but after about 1.5 feet, the grayish color you expect from packed earth just wasn't there. It turned black in a way that wasn't about shadow, so much as absence. I changed angles. Leaned over more. The light tunneled down and didn't come back. The county survey I'd pulled beforehand said there was a partial crawl space under the kitchen and back hallway. 18 inches of clearance. Dirt floor. Access through a hatch in the hallway closet. I glanced at that drawing in my truck while wolfing down a gas station burrito and hadn't thought about it twice. I killed the flashlight and sat back on my heels, thinking, maybe I'd cut right over a low spot. Maybe the dirt had settled deeper in this section. Maybe the beam was being swallowed by some weird geometry. I went looking for the crawlspace hatch. The hallway closet was one of those narrow deals between the kitchen and the back door, full of dusty wire hangers and a smell like old cardboard. The floor looked solid enough until I noticed one rectangle of board that wasn't quite like the others. Someone had painted over it God knows how many times, but you could see the seams if you squinted. I slid my flat bar into the crack and pried. The wood gave with a sticky tear. The hatch lifted and a breath of air hit my face that made me forget every explanation I just talked myself into. It wasn't the reek of mold or dead critters, the usual underhouse smell. It was cold, dry air that felt like it had never been inside a building before. There was a mineral tang to it, like when you walk into a limestone cave on a summer tour and the temperature drops 20 degrees. Underneath, there was something sharp and metallic. The closest my brain could grab was licking a 9-volt battery when you're a kid. I lowered the hatch all the way back and went to the garage for my good flashlight. 400 lumens, rechargeable, beat to hell but bright enough to fry your retinas. I lay flat on my stomach, shoulders in the closet, and pointed it down through the hatch. For the first few feet, everything looked normal. Dirt floor, a little uneven, but that's life. Concrete piers, cobwebs like gray lace between the joists. I could see the old galvanized plumbing snaking along, pitted and rusted, patched with bright copper in a few places that glinted in the light. Then the ground started going away. I watched the beam follow the packed dirt for maybe 6-7 feet, and then the earth just sloped down hard like the floor decided it was done being a floor and wanted to be a slide. It tilted away at an angle that made my inner ear complain just looking at it. Beyond that, the flashlight beam turned from a solid cone into a hazy suggestion. No bottom. I pulled back, the side of my face scraping the rough floorboards. I lay there listening to my own breathing in the quiet of that dead hallway and felt the shape of the house around me in a way I didn't like. Old farmhouses are liars. They look simple from the road, box, porch, roof. Inside, you find closets that go nowhere, doors that don't quite fit, whole rooms that sit over nothing because somebody wanted a parlor but didn't want to pay for the foundation. So I told myself it was like that. Maybe there was an old root cellar off one side, or a partial basement that never made it to paper. Maybe the survey was done by somebody who eyeballed it and guessed. I closed the hatch gently, set it back into place, and went back to the kitchen. I found a square I'd cut in the floor and dropped a scrap of plywood over it to keep from twisting my ankle. I told myself I'd take a better look in the morning, when the sun was up and my brain wasn't picking at shadows. That night, I slept in my trailer with a little kitchen window cracked to keep it from smelling like microwave dinners and sweaty clothes. The air outside had a bite. It was one of those early September nights that decides to show off, low 50s and clear. You get used to nighttime noises out on a property like that. Wind in the trees, coyotes yipping far off, grain bins popping as they heat and cool. The soybeans made this dry, whispering sound when the breeze moved over them, like pages being turned somewhere out in the dark. Usually I sleep like a rock on job sites. Put in 10 or 12 hours tearing out drywall. Your body doesn't really give you a choice. But I kept replaying that flashlight beam diving into nowhere. I kept feeling that cold breath from under the house in my nostrils. Around 2 in the morning, my bladder made the decision for me. I rolled out of bed, shoved on my boots, and stepped outside into the chill. The sky was clear enough that the stars looked fake, too sharp. I walked a few yards away from the trailer and pissed toward the tree-line. When I zipped up and turned back, my eyes drifted over the dark shape of the house out of habit. That's when I saw the light. Kitchen window, second from the right on the back wall. A soft yellow glow, just there, not flipping on like a switch, not dancing like someone's flashlight. It was like someone had set a candle inside the room and walked away, leaving it too far from the glass to see the flame. There was no power in the house yet. I hadn't tied anything in. I stood there with my hand still on my fly, and my brain went through every wrong explanation it could reach for. Headlights from the county road, I thought first, but the angle was wrong and there wasn't any sound. Moonlight bouncing off something reflective. Maybe, but the moon was behind me, blocked by the tree line. I stared at that window until my eyes watered. The glow stayed steady and soft for a good 3 minutes. Then it went out like somebody pinched it. I must have stood in exactly the same spot for another 5 minutes, watching dark glass and telling myself I'd imagined it. Then I went back in the trailer, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed with my boots still on. I didn't sleep again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dull yellow square. At sunrise, I walked up to the house with my coffee and a thermos and my crowbar in my hand, just in case. It was quiet, dew on the weeds. One crow yelling at something invisible in the field across the road. Inside, nothing was moved. The air had that stale, closed-up smell, but nothing else. No footprints in the dust besides mine. The kitchen counters were as empty as I'd left them. No candle, no lamp, no evidence of anything. I checked the breaker box, even though I knew damn well it was dead. Still off. When I turned around to leave the kitchen, my boots scuffed the edge of the scrap plywood I dropped over my cutout. It slid. I froze. I hadn't put it there at an angle. I knew I hadn't. I laid it nice and square like a lid. Now it was shifted a good 6-7 inches to the side, so one corner of the hole was open. Just enough you could catch your heel in it if you weren't looking. My first instinct was to tell myself I must have kicked it yesterday. Or maybe the vibration of the saw had rattled it. Some dumb, normal reason. The more I tried to picture it, the more that little voice in the back of my head, the one that keeps you from stepping off roofs, started saying, "You know, that's bullshit." I nudged it back into place with my foot and then went and got a cinder block from the garage. I set it dead center on the plywood. Even if I got drunk and line danced in there, that cover wasn't going anywhere. The same part of me that went through foreclosures during the recession and made money where everybody else went broke was already calculating. If there's some weird deep crawl space or a cistern, it might add value. Wine cellar, storm shelter. People eat that up on listings. But the part of me that had stood in the cold at 2 in the morning watching a dead kitchen glow for no reason was saying something else. Don't be stupid. Sell it as is. Take the loss. I compromised with myself, which is how bad shit happens. I told myself I'd at least find out what the hell was under there before I decided. I grabbed my flashlight, my 30-foot tape, and my phone. On impulse, I also grabbed my respirator and a pair of knee pads. Not because I expected anything dangerous, I told myself. Just because it was going to be a tight, dirty crawl. The hatch in the hallway closet was still propped open where I'd left it. The air that breathed out of it this time felt even colder. I checked my phone, 9:02 a.m., and took a picture of the open hatch just so I could tell later whether anything had changed. Then I lay down on my stomach, swung my legs through the opening, and dropped. My boots hit hard soil about 1.5 feet down. Fine. That matched the survey. I crouched, my head brushing the joists, and swept the flashlight around. Under the closet, it looked normal. Packed earth, spiderwebs, a forgotten paint can half sunk in dirt. Someone had lost a hammer down here a long time ago. The head was a rusted lump. The handle chewed by something. The air smelled like a cave mixed with a hardware store. The clearance was maybe 16 inches where the joists ran low. I had to flatten myself and drag my body forward with my forearms, knees scraping in the dirt. The respirator made my own breath loud in my ears. I crawled toward where I knew the kitchen was, following the old plumbing. The galvanized pipe was rough under my gloved hand, coated in dust and a crust of mineral deposits. Here and there, bright copper patches showed where someone had done repairs years back. After maybe 8 feet, my hand came down on nothing. I stopped so fast my ribs slammed the joist above me. I cursed in the mask and inched the flashlight forward. The packed dirt floor just ended. I was right on the edge of it, my body balanced on that last little shelf. Beyond, the earth fell away in a steep slope that made my stomach drop just to look at. The beam slid down it, catching little stones and torn roots, until the dirt gave way to bare rock. Limestone. I recognized the color and texture. Gray, slick in places, scored in others. The kind of stone you see in old quarries and culverts out here. And carved into that stone, continuing down into the dark, were steps. Not neat, modern stairs. rough-cut treads, irregular rises, worn in the middle like someone had been walking up and down them for 100 years. They hugged the rock wall and disappeared into shadow. I remember the feeling in my chest. It wasn't the jump scare kind of fear. It was the slow, heavy dread you get when you realize the noise you've been ignoring in your engine isn't going away and you're 30 miles from the nearest mechanic. The survey said 18 inches of crawl space. I was looking at something that could have passed for the start of an old mine shaft. I backed away carefully, feeling behind me with my heels until I hit that packed dirt shelf again. My shoulders scraped rock. Something sharp tore my shirt, scratching the skin under it. I didn't care. I just wanted out. I crawled faster than I should have, smacking my elbow on a pier, knocking dirt into my face. By the time I hauled myself up through the hatch, I was breathing hard and sweating in the cold air. The hallway felt wrong. Too bright, too narrow. The house above me suddenly wasn't just an old structure. It was this thin shell over something that had no business being there. I lowered the hatch gently into place. Then I did something I'd never done in 12 years of flipping houses. I called the county assessor's office to ask if their paperwork was wrong. The woman who answered sounded like she was doing 3 things at once. I gave her the parcel number and asked if she had any record of an old basement, a cistern, a root cellar. Anything under the Mackin place besides the crawl space on the 1987 survey. She put me on hold. I stood in the gutted living room, looking at the stains on the ceiling where the roof had leaked and listened to cheap instrumental music buzz in and out. When she came back, she said, "All I've got is what you have, sir. Partial crawl space. No basement. No other structures. What about before the current house?" I asked, "Was there anything else on that land? A log cabin, something like that?" There was a pause, and I could hear her clicking. "The earliest structure note I've got is 1920s farmhouse," she said finally. "Same footprint. No outbuildings besides the barn that collapsed in '04. What about old maps?" I pushed, even though I could hear the impatience coming over the line. "Anything before that?" "I'd have to pull from archives," she said. "We're short-staffed this week. I can add it to the research queue and call you back." "Please do. It's important." She said she would. She never did. That should have been my cue. People tell these stories, and everybody reading thinks, I'd have left right then. No, you wouldn't. You'd do what I did. You decide you needed more proof before you threw away 63 grand you didn't really have. You'd tell yourself there was an explanation. Old storm shelter. Prohibition cellar. Something. You decide to be smart about it. The next morning, I got serious. I had a plan. Go down far enough to see where the steps ended, measure what I could, and get the hell out. Document everything. If I had to bring in an inspector or a structural engineer, I'd have photos instead of sounding like some lunatic who thinks his house is sitting on the mouth of hell. I grabbed my brighter flashlight, the 100-foot tape, a ball of mason's twine, fresh batteries, and my respirator. I tucked my phone in my shirt pocket. I told myself I'd be down there 15 minutes tops. The air under the hatch bit at my face as I went in. It was the same temperature drop as walking into an industrial freezer. My fingers went stiff in seconds. I tied one end of the twine to the base of a pier right under the hatch, then looped it around my wrist. I wasn't getting lost in loose dirt and stone steps like some idiot urban explorer. The crawl to the edge felt short at that time. I knew where I was going. I eased onto the slope and tested the first step with my boot. Solid. Sandstone might crumble. Limestone holds if it's been there this long. I took a breath, adjusted my respirator, and started down. The steps were uneven. Some were barely more than ledges, others knee-high. I had to watch my footing, shining the light at my feet instead of ahead. The walls were close on either side, rough and damp in patches where the stone wept. I counted out loud in my head. 1 step, 2 step. It felt stupid like a kid's rhyme, but it kept me from thinking about how far down I might be going. 30 steps in, the air got colder if that was possible. My breath fogged so thick it briefly obscured the beam when I exhaled. The smell of stone and that battery metal tang got stronger. 40 steps. 50. At 60, my thighs were starting to burn. At 65, I began to feel this quiet pressure against my eardrums like descending in a plane. 70. The stairs flattened into a small landing hacked out of the rock. I stopped and swept the light around, squinting. I was in a chamber about 10 feet across. The ceiling was low enough that if I straightened all the way up, my hard hat would have scraped. The walls were rough, scored with tool marks. In the far wall, a darker opening led even further down. I remember thinking, how the hell did this never collapse? How did nobody know? Then my flashlight passed over something that made my brain glitch. On a natural stone ledge to my left, about waist height, lay my tools. Not tools like mine. My actual goddamn tools. My DeWalt drill, the yellow casing scarred in the exact same places. My speed square. My chalk line. The flat bar I'd used on the closet hatch, right down to the duct tape around one end. They were arranged in a neat line, handles pointed toward where I was standing, like someone had set them out for inspection. I froze. The first stupid thought was, did I bring them down and forget? That's how hard my mind was scrambling to make it normal. But I could picture exactly where I'd left that drill, on the workbench by the garage door. I remember being irrationally proud that I'd finally found my damn speed square again. The twine was still taut on my wrist, leading back the way I'd come. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't gone back up. There was no way anybody could have slipped in behind me and hauled my stuff down without me hearing it or feeling the cord jerk. I put the flashlight between my teeth and grabbed the flat bar with my gloved hand. It was like picking up a piece of ice right out of the freezer. The steel burned. I swore through my teeth and almost dropped it. I snatched up the drill and the square, bundling them awkwardly against my chest, then turned in a slow circle, half expecting to see someone standing at the entrance of that darker passage, just out of the light. Nothing. Just stone. Just more steps waiting. I wanted to keep going about as much as I wanted a nail through my foot. I backed toward the stairs, one hand on the wall, tools clutched against me with my other arm. I didn't run. Running on irregular, slippery stone steps seemed like the fastest way to die stupid. I counted on the way back, needing to know. It felt like less. It always does going uphill. 70. I hit the packed dirt lip and hauled myself onto my stomach, dragging the tools behind me. My knees and shoulders screamed. The crawl felt longer than before, like the joists had shifted closer together while I was gone. I popped up through the hatch into the hallway and staggered to my feet, ripping the respirator off to suck in warm air. The hall light through the dirty window looked wrong. Dimmer, more orange. I checked my phone. 9:14 a.m. when I went down. 6:47 p.m. now. 9.5 hours. My legs almost went out from under me. I leaned against the wall, the tools clattering at my feet, and stared at that number like I could will it to change. I remembered 20 minutes. Maybe half an hour if I stretched it. My thighs burned, sure. My arms felt like I'd been crawling. But I didn't feel like I'd been down there for damn near a full workday. I opened the front door and stepped onto the sagging porch. The sky was that washed-out late afternoon color, and the soybeans across the road were black silhouettes against it where the sun was going down. I walked straight to the trailer without looking back at the house. My hands shook as I shoved my tools into the truck bed, one after another. No more leaving anything in that garage. If something down there wanted to borrow my drill again, it could come ask. I sat in the driver's seat with the door open, feet on the gravel, and stared down the long curve of the road toward Crofton. I thought about just starting the truck and driving until the gas gauge hit E and I saw something that wasn't a field. Instead, I found my phone and called the assessor's office again. The same woman picked up. I told her my name and asked if she'd had a chance to check those old records. There was a pause. I could hear papers shuffling instead of keys. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "We've been slammed. It'll probably be next week." "There's something under this house," I said. My voice sounded high and bright in my own ears. "It's not on your survey. It's more than crawl space." "What kind of something?" she asked, in that careful tone bureaucrats get when they're about to decide whether you're their problem or somebody else's. "Like a carved-out staircase," I said. "Like a catacomb, or, I don't know, a cave somebody worked." It's deep. I don't know how deep. It shouldn't be here. There was a silence just long enough for me to picture her raising her eyebrows at a coworker. That sounds like something a structural engineer would need to look at, she said. We just deal with records, Mr. Dennis, I said. Mr. Dennis, if you're concerned about safety, you should probably leave the structure and contact a professional. She was done. You could hear it. She wasn't going to pull any old maps tonight because some house flipper had the spooks. Yeah, I said. Sure. Thanks. I hung up. The smart thing would have been to take her advice. Instead, I sat there until the sun went down and the fields turned into a black ocean around the truck. The house loomed in my peripheral vision like the edge of a cliff. My heart rate never really went back to normal. Around 10, I made myself move. I checked the locks on the house, more out of habit than hope, then went into the trailer and did the same. I reheated some leftover chili, ate 2 bites, and dumped the rest in the trash. My stomach was a knot. I tried to distract myself with TV. My hotspot internet was too shitty out here for streaming, so I watched some paranormal nonsense I had downloaded on my laptop. People in night vision wandering around old prisons, whispering about cold spots. I found myself pausing it every few minutes to listen to the silence outside. At 3 in the morning, the silence broke. It started as this faint scraping sound, just on the edge of hearing, like something heavy being dragged across wood, far away. I muted the laptop and sat up, every muscle in my body going tight. The scraping came again. It was coming from the direction of the house. I killed the lights in the trailer, heart pounding. My hand found the big mag light I kept under the dinette. The window over the sink faced the back of the house. From there, I could see the kitchen window, black rectangle on black siding. A yellowish shape bloomed in it, soft and hazy. This time, the light wasn't stationary. It moved slowly from one window to the next, like someone walking room to room with a weak lantern. It was never bright enough to show a clear outline of whoever was supposedly carrying it, just the suggestion of something moving behind dirty glass. I sat there frozen, fingers digging into the edge of the counter hard enough that the cheap laminate creaked. The scraping sound got more distinct when the light drifted closer to my side. It wasn't the drag I'd imagined. It was rhythmic, almost gentle. Talp, 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 metal on stone. It hit me what the noise reminded me of, the way I tap a foundation with my flat bar, listening for hollow spots. I don't know how long I watched that light move through rooms that had no power. My eyes burned, but I couldn't blink. When it finally faded, seeping away like someone dimming a rheostat, the tapping sound went with it. I didn't sleep. I sat in the truck with the engine running, heater on low, doors locked, and stared at the outline of the house until the first gray light started to bleed into the sky. When the sun finally dragged itself up, I killed the engine and went back to the house like an idiot. The front door still stuck the same way. I had to lean my shoulder into it to pop the frame. Inside, everything looked exactly as it had 12 hours ago. Dust, cobwebs, my footprints in the fine plaster powder on the floors. No signs of a lantern-wielding intruder. The kitchen light switch clicked uselessly when I flicked it. Of course it did. I didn't know what I'd been hoping for. Then I saw the hole in the floor. The piece of plywood I'd weighted with the cinder block was off to the side, leaning against a cabinet. The block sat on the floor beside it like somebody had set it down carefully. The opening in the pine planks was larger. Where I'd cut a rough 2-foot square, there was now a 3-foot one, perfectly straight edges corner square. The boards that had made up the missing section were stacked in a tidy pile next to the hole, each cut into neat 6-inch lengths. The cuts were clean, like someone had used a sharp blade and taken their time. I walked around the hole in small, tight steps, my boots squeaking on old varnish. I hadn't done that. I would have remembered opening a bigger section. I sure as hell would have remembered cutting my boards into little logs and stacking them like firewood. I crouched and looked down. The darkness inside looked thicker than it had before, like water and shade had a baby. A bead of cold air touched my face. The fear should have spiked right then. Instead, there was this strange pull. Like finally seeing the face of someone who's been watching you from a distance for a while. Not relief, exactly. Not exactly dread, either. Just a sense that something was waiting, and it was rude not to at least say hello. This is the part where I know I sound crazy. I straightened up and backed away. My hands were trembling. My heart was doing rabbit kicks in my chest. And over the top of all that, a clear, steady thought kept repeating. You have to go back. You can't leave it like this. I told myself I'd only go to the chamber, just far enough to make sure nothing had changed. Take more pictures. Maybe leave something down there deliberately like a test, instead of having it taken. Control the situation. That's the lie I told myself, anyway. I spent an hour in the garage first, just for the illusion of normalcy. I sorted fasteners. I rearranged my saw blades. I checked the oil in the generator. None of it needed doing. I was stalling. Eventually, I ran out of excuses. I got my gear together again. Flashlight, phone, timer app open, respirator, gloves. I didn't bother with the twine this time. I wanted both hands free. The hatch in the closet lifted more easily than it had any right to, though it didn't even creak. It felt like it had been opened and closed a lot more times than I'd actually touched it. I lowered myself down. The crawl to the slope felt shorter again. Or maybe I just wasn't thinking about distance anymore. At the lip where dirt became stone, I sat for a second on my haunches, light off. The darkness ahead of me was thick. That's the only way I can describe it. It soaked up the light, leaking from around the hatch above like it was thirsty. I turned the flashlight on and started down. I didn't count this time. I watched the timer on my phone instead. I wanted to know exactly how long it took, how much my head was messing with me. The chamber came sooner than my legs thought it should, which just made everything worse. The landing, the stone ledge. I swept the beam over the spot where my tools had been. They were gone, obviously. I put them in the truck. In their place, right in the middle of that ledge, was something else. A chair. My kitchen chair. Straight-backed, white paint worn off in a crescent along the top rail where years of hands had grabbed it. The left armrest had a chip in it from when I'd banged into it with my toolbox the first week I moved in. There was a little smear of the drywall dust on the backrest from where I'd leaned it against a half-finished wall. It sat exactly center, facing the dark mouth of the deeper passage. For legs on stone. No boble. I felt my guts drop in a weird, slow way, like going over the top of a hill in a car. That chair had been in the kitchen yesterday. I knew it. I would have bet my life on it, apparently. And how would that bet go? A little part of my brain asked, very dry. Fuck you, I said out loud to no one. My voice died in the stone like I'd shouted into pillows. I walked around the chair carefully, keeping it between me and the deeper opening without quite meaning to. The flashlight beam played over the seat. No dust, no whips, like it had just been set there. The logical part of my brain pointed out that if someone was messing with me, some neighbor kid with a skeleton key and more balls than sense, they'd have had to haul that thing down the same crawl space and steps I'd done. I couldn't see anyone doing that as a prank. Not twice. I pulled my phone out and tried to take a picture. The screen showed a gray smear. I tried again, moving closer, angling the light differently, but every photo came out the same, maybe a faint suggestion of shapes, but no detail. It was like the phone didn't want to see what my eyes saw. A bad idea formed. I sat down. The seat was cold through my jeans, the kind of cold that goes straight to the bone. For a second, I had a vivid, stupid image of the chair fusing to me, roots or tendrils coming up through the slats. Nothing happened. I sat there, breathing through the respirator, listening. My timer ticked steadily on my phone. 2 minutes. 3. The deeper passage yawned in front of me, carved steps falling away into a thicker dark. I stood up so fast the chair scraped. The noise was loud and ugly in the small space. My own nerves jumped. Fuck this, I said, much more quietly, and backed toward the stairs up. This time I watched the clock on the way back. From the moment my foot hit the first upward step to the moment I shoved myself out of the hatch, for minutes and 32 seconds had passed. When I got my shoulders through and rolled onto the hallway floor, my phone buzzed with a notification. 6 hours earlier, somebody had texted me about extending my truck warranty. The timestamp now said 5:51 p.m. I've been gone almost 6 hours. 4.5 minutes of exertion under the house. 6 hours above it. Time was slipping around whatever was under there like water around a rock. The next 3 days, I'm going to do my best to lay them out, but I need you to understand up front that they don't make sense. Not to me, and I was there. I stopped writing down times at some point. That was a mistake. I thought I'd remember. Why would you forget losing entire chunks of your day? Because something wants you to. That's my best guess now. I know I didn't leave the property. The truck stayed where it was, parked nose out by the trailer, keys on the table by the door. My gas tank didn't move. I never woke up to an empty coffee pot or a gas receipt in my pocket I didn't remember signing. I know I kept going down. That's the part that scares me the most when I think about it now. Whatever common sense I had left got sliced down into tiny rationalizations. Just one more trip, just to see if anything's moved. I remember the steps multiplying. The first 2 times, I hit the chamber at 70. After that, it was more. I started counting again on habit, because the numbers were the only thing that felt solid. One morning, or what I thought was morning, I went down and counted to 90 before the landing. The next time, 110. The distance between steps stayed the same. My legs still burned the same way. The numbers just stretched. I remember finding another chamber farther down, peeled off like an alcove from the main stair. This one was bigger, maybe the size of my trailer. The ceiling curved low, the stone damp and smooth, not jagged. It had a bed in it. My cot, the one from the trailer. Same olive green canvas. Same squeaky chain on one side. The bedding was my bedding, gray sheets, blue blanket. My pillow with the stupid little tear in the corner seam. I don't remember moving the bed down there. I don't remember stripping the trailer. But when I went back topside after that trip, my trailer was empty where the cot should have been. Just the aluminum ribs and a rectangle in the dust where it had sat. Later, was it later that same day? The next, I found another side chamber with my cooler in it. The blue igloo I kept stocked with beer and sandwich fixings. Down there, it sat on a smooth stone floor like someone had placed it gently. Inside, there were bottles of water, deli meat, mustard. The ice hadn't melted. It didn't even feel like ice. It felt thicker, like the cold in that place. Every time I found one of my things down there was a matching emptiness up top. I'd open a cabinet in the trailer and find it bare, even though I had a memory of putting something there that morning. It was like the space beneath the house was remaking itself in my image, building a place for me. The sounds changed, too. The tapping stopped after that second or third night. Instead, I started to hear this low, steady noise when I was in the house. At first, I thought it was the furnace kicking on by reflex, that deep hump and rush. But there was no furnace. Hell, there was no power. It was breathing, not human, slower than anything with lungs could manage. Each inhale seemed to take a full minute, the exhale another. It wasn't coming from the vents or the walls. It was just everywhere under my feet and behind my ears, like the house itself had a chest rising and falling. I shrugged it off as my own pulse echoing in my head. Then I heard it outside, walking from the trailer to my truck. A faint, endless in and out rhythm pressing against the night. I'm riding this in my trailer now, tugging at gaps in my memory like thread. My hands keep wanting to skip over certain bits. My brain insists, no, nothing interesting happened there, move on. It takes effort to sit here and force myself to rewind. I know it's October because the soybeans are gone. One morning I woke up and the field that had been a blurry green sea outside my window was just stubble. I hadn't seen a combine. I hadn't heard the engines. They'd come and gone while I was down there, or while I was sitting here staring at a wall somewhere, brain checked out. I stopped going under 4 days ago. 5? The calendar app on my phone says 4, but it's been wrong about other things, so who knows. The CRAWLSPASE hatch in the hallway is bigger now. I didn't cut it. I would swear I didn't cut it. It used to be a rectangle I had to wriggle through. Now it's square, maybe 4 feet by 4, with clean edges and no dust around them. like the wood just decided to rearrange its molecules. If I stand by it, I can feel cool air rising like mist. The breathing sound is loudest there. Sometimes, if I stand long enough, my name seems to be buried in it, stretched and distorted until it's more pattern than word. Dennis, back and forth in the in-between of inhale and exhale. I've tried to leave 3 times. The first time, I got as far as throwing my bag in the truck bed and turning the key. The engine coughed, wheezed, and died like something thick had been poured into the tank. When I checked, the gas was fine. The engine compartment was clean. The battery was good. The second time I tried, the key itself snapped in half between my fingers like cheap plastic. The third time was last night, or the night before. I can still feel the impression of the steering wheel under my palms. I sat there, truck dark, the world outside black except for a halo around the house. The light wasn't coming from any window. It was coming up through the floor. I could see it from the yard when I stepped out of the trailer, against my better judgment. The kitchen window was lit from below, yellowish glow slanting up like a stage. When I moved closer, my boots crunching on gravel that didn't sound quite like gravel anymore, I realized the glow was coming through the hole in the kitchen floor. The hole was bigger, big enough that if I'd stepped into the room without looking, I would have gone straight through. Standing in the doorway, I could see the top of the stone stairs through that glowing mouth. The light reached up the first 5, maybe 6 steps, turning their edges sharp and weirdly flat, like the light had weight. There was something on the top step. It was sitting in my kitchen chair. For a second, I thought it was me. The proportions were right. The way the shoulders slumped, the angle of the head tilted slightly forward, hands on the knees. A mirror reflection seen from behind. But the light never quite hit its face. The glow slid around where a face should have been, pooling under the jaw, leaving that whole area unnaturally blank. My brain kept trying to fill it in and making something wrong. I didn't go closer. I couldn't make my feet move. I backed out of the kitchen, eyes locked on that chair until the doorway cut it off. I didn't turn around until I was on the porch. My hand found the railing without looking. The wood under my palm felt wrong, warmer than the air, almost damp. I went back to the trailer and locked the door and pulled the curtains tight. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. The breathing filled the tiny space around me, louder than it had ever been, like the walls were moving with it. I sat at the little built-in table with my laptop open and the cursor blinking in a blank document, and I finally did the thing I'd been half planning and half avoiding since the first night I saw that glow. I started writing all of this down, not for a cop, not for the county, for whoever would end up seeing the listing when the Mackin place went back on the market, for some stranger from Columbus or Cincinnati who'd pull up the photos and think, that could be cute with some work. For you. My hands are cramping. Every once in a while I lose a few seconds just staring at the screen, and when I come back my fingers are on the keys like they've been moving without me. I keep telling myself that when I get this all out, when I finish, I'll pack the laptop and the phone and the clothes I care about, and I'll start walking down that gravel road toward town until somebody in a pickup stops and asks if I need a ride. I keep telling myself I'll do that. I just haven't yet, because the breathing is a little louder now. And something about the rhythm has changed. The pauses are shorter. The inhales sound expectant. And when I close my eyes, I keep seeing that chair on the stone landing. The way it fits the space. The way it's angled toward the deeper dark, like it's watching something I can't see yet, waiting for me to sit back down. There's this thing they don't tell you about living alone in the middle of nowhere. You can go a long time without hearing your own voice, and when you finally do, it sounds like somebody else. I realized that when I read the first paragraph of what I'd written out loud. Jesus, I said, and my throat felt raw, like I hadn't used it in weeks. The breathing under the floor didn't change when I spoke. That was worse than if it had sped up. It just kept going, steady as a metronome. Inhale, pause, exhale. A slow tide under the property. I closed the laptop. The click sounded too loud in the tiny trailer. The breathing seemed to grow around the silence, like it was filling the space I just emptied. All right, I told nobody. Enough. I grabbed my phone, my wallet, the keys with the snapped-off truck key still on the ring. Habit. My boots were already on. I opened the trailer door and stepped into the cold. The air hit me like I'd opened a freezer. I could see my breath in long, slow streams that didn't match the rhythm I heard in the ground. The house sat in front of me, black against a star-smeared sky. No wind. The trees along the property line were still. The gravel under my boots crunched in a way that made me think of breaking bones. I walked straight past the house and down the driveway toward the county road. My hand brushed my pocket to make sure my phone was still there, pressed to my thigh like a talisman. I told myself I was just testing whether I could leave. Not actually leaving, not yet. I had the laptop and most of my tools still back there. I wasn't walking away from everything for good, just going far enough to prove I still could. That's how you talk yourself into staying inside a burning building. You pretend you're just checking the door. There's a curve in the gravel lane where you lose sight of the house for the first time. Trees on both sides, branches arching overhead. In the daylight, it's nothing. At night, with your only light coming from the stars and the dim glow of your own phone screen, it feels like stepping into a throat. I reached that bend in what felt like 30 seconds. My breath fogged, and the air in the little tunnel of trees felt thicker, heavier. The breathing sound faded a little like I turned down the volume on it. I realized, in that small relief, that I'd been hearing it louder outside the trailer than in. I took one more step toward the county road. The gravel sloped weird under my boot. It's hard to explain unless you've stepped on something that wasn't where you thought it was. My heel went down, and instead of hitting the expected packed stone, it slid sideways like I'd put on a tilted board. I windmilled my arms, caught myself on a tree trunk, bark damp and strangely warm under my fingers. When I looked down, the gravel wasn't flat. It sagged. Not much. An inch, maybe. The surface looked normal, gray stones, dust, but my weight made it flex almost imperceptibly, like a skin stretched over something hollow. I bounced my foot a little. The ground answered with this faint, muffled creak. The breathing got louder again. I looked back over my shoulder. From that angle, between the trunks, I could see just the roof line of the house. No lights, no movement, just a dark shape blocking the stars. I looked down at the sagging gravel. I turned around and walked back to the house. Call me a coward. Call me stupid. The truth is simpler. I felt like if I kept going, the ground was going to open up and swallow me from the ankles down, and whatever was under the Mac in place wasn't just under the Mac in place anymore. That's not how dirt works, I muttered to myself, half laughing. That's not how any of this works. The laugh sounded thin, like it was coming through a bad speaker. Back in the yard, the breathing settled around me like a cloak. Steady, calm. If a sound could be smug, it was. I went to the truck and tried the key anyway, knowing damn well it was pointless. The broken half in the ignition turned with a little bit of play. Nothing happened. No das lights. No started wine. The battery tested fine last time I checked, but turning that key felt like twisting the knob on a prop door in a movie set. I wasn't connected to anything anymore. I sat there in the cold cab for a long time, hands on the wheel, forehead on my knuckles, listening to the absence of the engine trying to catch. It would have been nice if that was the moment I cracked. If I screamed or cried or started punching the steering column. Something dramatic. Instead, it was like somebody flipped a breaker in the back of my skull and half my fear circuits just shut off. I was tired, bone tired, not just for not sleeping, but from fighting the same thought over and over. Go down there and see. I got out of the truck. My body felt slower, heavier, but my hands didn't shake anymore. Inside the house, the air was colder than outside. Steam puffed from my mouth with every breath. My boots rang a little on the floorboards. I hadn't noticed that before. The hallway to the kitchen felt longer than it had any right to be. Each step carried me over a house I barely recognized. The paint on the walls flaked in long curls like dried skin. The faint stains on the ceiling had spread, dark fingers branching outward. The kitchen door frame was narrower, or maybe it was just me hugging myself as I stepped through. The hole in the floor took up almost half the room. I hadn't seen it from this angle yet. Every other time, I'd come on it from the side. Now, standing in the doorway, it was like looking down into a mouth that had peeled back its lips. The edges of the opening were clean, boards cut in a perfect circle this time, not a ragged square. The planks that had been removed were stacked on the far counter in neat bundles, each bound with my blue painter's tape. Warm yellow light seeped up from below, soft and steady. It painted the underside of the remaining floorboards, climbed the walls in a faint, flickering gradation. The top of the stone staircase sat maybe 2 feet below the kitchen level now. The gap between wood and rock had narrowed. If I'd wanted to, I could have stepped onto the first tread with one normal stride. The chair was still on that top step. It was empty. That scared me more than if I'd seen someone sitting in it. I stood there with my hands flexing uselessly at my sides. The breathing was loudest here, a low rush that synced up with the light somehow. When it inhaled, the glow dimmed a little. When it exhaled, the light strengthened, crawling another half-inch up the wall. I thought about closing the door and walking away. I thought about going back to the trailer, packing the laptop, hiking that gravel lane again, trusting the ground not to sag this time. Those were reasonable ideas. Safe ideas. Ideas that belonged to a person who wasn't already half in love with the mystery chewing holes in his life. I don't have a heroic excuse for what I did. No missing kids to save, no ghost of a dead wife to chase. All I had was curiosity and the feeling that this thing had noticed me in particular. Nobody likes to be ignored once they've been noticed. I stepped as close to the edge of the opening as I dared and knelt, one knee popping in protest. The light from below bathed my hands. It wasn't warm like firelight. It didn't really feel like light at all, more like standing near a running freezer compressor or a high voltage line. Some energy you don't have a good name for, humming just out of reach. I put my hand on the nearest floorboard. The wood was warm. I jerked back like I'd been burned. My heart kicked my ribs once hard. I swallowed, tasted metal. Okay, I said. Okay. I went to the garage and got my respirator, my gloves, the flashlight, the 100-foot tape, and one of the kitchen chairs that was still upstairs. I don't know why I took the second chair. It felt like balance. If there was one down there already, maybe bringing another would make it less like walking into someone else's living room uninvited. Back in the kitchen, I set the extra chair against the wall and slung the flashlight from my wrist with its lanyard. Standing at the edge, the air rising from below tasted like the CRAWLSPASE had the first time, mineral, battery bite cold. But underneath that was something familiar, not a specific smell, more like the memory of one, like walking into a childhood bedroom after 20 years and catching a ghost of detergent and dust that makes your chest hurt. I swung my legs through. My boots hit the first stone step with a hollow sound. The light from below was stronger here, coming from farther down, bouncing off the walls in a way that didn't obey normal geometry. Shadows ran wrong. The breathing smoothed out to a constant background shudder. It made my teeth itch. I didn't look back up at the kitchen. There's a reason you don't look down when you're walking over a narrow beam. Same logic. I started to descend. This time I didn't count. I tried to. The numbers slid out of my head after a while, lost between the echoes of my footsteps and the soft hiss of my own breath in the mask. I get to 15, 20, then realize I've been thinking about the way my boots sounded and had no idea how many more I'd taken. The light grew brighter as I went. Not brighter like a bulb being turned up, but more present. It didn't hurt my eyes. It just made them feel dry, like I'd been staring too long. The stone walls smoothed out, tool marks fading under an impossible number of hands. My hand skated over the surface once and came away with a faint dampness that evaporated the second the air touched it. After some uncountable number of steps, the narrow stair opened into a larger space. Not a chamber this time, a corridor. It ran straight ahead, maybe 6 feet wide, walls arching up into a low ceiling. The floor was the same stone, worn into shallow hollows where thousands of feet had walked. The light came from nowhere and everywhere, soaking the stone in yellow that wasn't quite yellow if you looked at it too long. On my right, just a few feet from where the stair led out, was the landing with the chair. My chair, the one that had been on the top step. It sat flush against the wall now, angled toward the corridor. Beside it was the second chair, the one I'd just lugged down from the kitchen, except I hadn't set it there. I was still holding it. I looked dumbly at the weight in my hands. My fingers were wrapped around empty air. I checked behind me on instinct, even though I knew I hadn't stopped. Nothing. Bare stone. I turned back. 2 chairs side by side like a theater balcony, both facing the deeper passage. I had the sudden, unnerving sense of being late to something. Like the movie had started and I was still standing in the aisle, blocking the view. My legs folded under me without asking my permission. I sat in the left-hand chair. The stone under my boots was cool, but the seat was warm this time, like someone had just stood up. The breathing impossibly quieted a little. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the tension in my shoulders to drip away. Long enough for my brain to stop screaming and start doing that weird, dreamy float it does when you're right on the edge of sleep. At some point, there was movement in the right-hand chair. You know how there's a difference between an empty room and a room where somebody's in it? Even if they're perfectly still and you can't see them, the air shifts. The way your skin feels shifts. 1 second, the other chair was just a chair. The next, it wasn't. I didn't see anything appear. There was no horror movie whoosh. The light didn't flicker. I just went from being alone to not alone. I kept my eyes on the corridor ahead. If I turned my head, if I tried to look directly at what was sitting next to me, I had the bone-deep certainty that I'd see too much and not enough at the same time, and my brain would tear like wet paper. So I didn't. I stared straight ahead, and something beside me breathed in sync with the thing under the house. After a while, it spoke. Dennis. It wasn't a voice in the normal sense. It didn't come from a throat. It came from the stone and the air and the weird not light all at once, layered and echoing. It sounded like my name being dragged across a gravel road. I swallowed. The inside of the respirator tasted like rubber and spit. Yeah, I said. My voice sounded stupid and small and very, very human. You came, it said. The words were simple. The weight behind them wasn't. There was no accusation. No triumph. Just inevitability. Like gravity saying, of course you fell. What else were you going to do? I didn't have a lot of options, I said. You've got kind of clingy rental agreement. It laughed. I didn't like that it laughed. The laughter wasn't loud. It was a low rippling through the stone, like distant thunder. It went on just a half second too long. You had every option, it said. You still do. Pretty sure I don't, I said. Frontier must have cut my service, caused times acting like a drunk up there. The thing next to me shifted, or maybe the light around it did. I kept my eyes glued to the corridor. Far ahead, the passage kinked left out of sight. You notice it, it said. Most don't. They drown in it without knowing they're underwater. You keep coming up for air. I was never much of a swimmer, I said. You're not here to joke. Yeah, because you dragged down my cooler in my bed. That's usually the part of the movie where the guy tries not to scream. Another laugh, shorter. The chair creaked, and my skin crawled at the idea that furniture I'd bought at a Habitat for Humanity thrifty shit show was now squeaking in hell or wherever this counted as. Names, it said, almost amused. You cling to them. I like hearing you try, I said. Makes this feel more conversational. Silence for a moment. The breathing in the bones of the place went on, but the presence next to me seemed to narrow, focusing. What do you think this is? It asked. It took me a second to realize it was a real question. I'd expected the usual cosmic horror monologue. You're nothing, there's only me, blah blah. Instead, it sounded curious. I don't know, I said honestly. At first I thought old root cellar, hidden room, underground railroad, storm bunker, One of the usual rumors you hear about old houses. And it kept going and growing and fucking with time. So now I guess my best guess is I'm sitting in a throat. It hummed if a place can hum. Close, it said. Enlighten me. You call it a house, it said. A property. Lot 7. Parcel. It rattled off my parcel number, every digit. You wrap its edges in numbers and ink and say, this is mine. You think the shell is the thing. That's how mortgages work, yeah. The shell rots, it said. Men die in it. Your county seizes it. Someone else writes their name on the line. The shell changes, but you all want the same illusion. That we own something, I said. That you're above something, it corrected. You think the ground is beneath you. Support. Background. You walk on it. Shit on it. Bury things in it. You pretend it isn't breathing. The corridor ahead seemed to pulse with the word. I swallowed again, throat dry. So what are you then? I asked. The landlord. It didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, full but not empty. Finally, it said, I'm the part that doesn't change. That's not an answer. It is, just not the kind that fits in your tongue. I wished I'd never sat down. Every second I stayed in that chair, some part of me, way down in the old brainstem, was trying to run and finding no muscles to work with. You're good with metaphor, I said. Ever consider a podcast? This laugh was almost fond. You came here with your little lights, it said. Your tools, your measurements. You thought you were going to fix the shell. Flip it. Sell your piece of the illusion and move on. You dug into my skin without knowing. You were already in the real estate listing, I said. Don't pin that on me. You cut the first hole, it said, ignoring that. You pried up the hatch. You crawled. You stepped. Each choice, you asked a question. I answered with space. You asked again. I answered with time. It shifted in the chair again. I could hear what fibers rub against each other like teeth. You're not the first, it added. You're just the first in a while who listened. The hair on the back of my neck did something new. What do you mean, not the first? I open where I'm opened, it said. Sometimes it's a well. Sometimes a mine. Sometimes a flood-carved gully or a war crater. Sometimes a house some man refuses to leave. The shape upstairs doesn't matter. Images sparked in my head. Old quarries filling with black water, sinkholes eating Florida backyards. That story about the guy in Pennsylvania whose living room just turned into a pit one night. How many? I asked, because apparently I hate myself. How many houses? It asked back, amused. How many shells? How many little boxes you've nailed together and called permanent? The laugh this time was sharp. More than you've named. Less than there will be. And how many guys like me? I pushed. How many listeners? Enough, it said. Not enough. The corridor ahead of us seemed to lean closer, like the vanishing point had shifted. Why me? I asked. I'm not special. I'm just some idiot who likes cheap limestone foundations. That's why. It said simply. You're boring. You're practical. You look at rot and think, I can work with that. You were never going to call a priest or a ghost hunter. You were going to crawl. I almost laughed. It came out a wheeze. So what now? I asked. You give me the pitch? Timeshare in the underworld. It didn't laugh this time. You can keep pretending this is something you can walk away from, it said finally. You can keep scrambling up and down, measuring, complaining about the plumbing. I'll keep answering. More steps, more rooms, more of your things where they belong. Belong where? It didn't hesitate. Below. The word dropped through my chest like a rock. You want me to what? I asked. Move in. You already have. I couldn't argue with that. My bed, my cooler, my tools, even my damn chairs. Piece by piece, the version of my life that fit sunlight was being eaten by the version that fit this place. There was a thought I'd been skirting since the first time I checked my phone after a trip down and saw hours missing. It finally came into focus. How long? I said, voice low. Have I been here? Not since closing day. Actually here. The pause felt heavy. Not long, it said, and very long. Pick one. You came to the shell in early September, it said. You parked your trailer. You plugged in your tools. You ate gas station food. That's the story your clock will tell you. That's not what I asked. You've been walking into me and out of me since before you knew what a house was, it said calmly. Every field you played in, every ditch you dug with your little plastic shovel, every time you lay on your back and watched clouds. You think this is new because your fear is new. I've been here, breathing under you, waiting for you to notice the floor sloping. It wasn't bragging. That somehow made it worse. If I get up, I said, and walk back up the stairs, what happens? You go back to your shell, it said. You finish your letter. You worry the edges of it until your fingers bleed. You sit in your trailer and listen to me breathe and pretend you have a choice. That's one option, I said. What's the other? It didn't answer right away. When it did, its voice was softer, almost conversational. You go forward, it said. You see how deep the question really goes. That's it? Those are my options? Sit upstairs and slowly lose my mind, or walk into you, and what? Dissolve. Names, it said again, gently mocking. You always want names. I like to know what I'm signing up for. You already did, it said, when you cut the floor. We sat there for a while, side by side, me staring at the curve in the corridor ahead, and it staring at, I don't know, me, the kitchen, the sky. Eventually, the breathing shifted again. Not louder, just impatient. I thought about the assessor's clerk who never called back. The soybean farmer who probably didn't even realize his field line brushed a mouth. The people in Crofton who called it the Mackin place like the name meant anything against what was below. I thought about some young couple from Columbus scrolling Zillow on their couch, stopping at the words large lot and original character. Her saying, it's charming, and him saying, we could make that work. I don't want anybody else going down there, I said quietly. That's not your decision, it said. It's my story, I snapped, surprising myself. It's my goddamn house. For now, silence. Then, unexpectedly, a small conceding sound. You can warn them, it said. That's what you're doing upstairs, isn't it? Scratching words into your little glowing stone. Sending them out. It meant the laptop. The post I hadn't written yet, but was somehow already writing. They won't listen, it added. Not most. They never do. But you can try. And if I stay up there and do that, I said slowly, you just let me? I don't take, it said. I don't need to. You come, or you don't. Either way, I keep growing. That sounds like taking to me. A smile pressed against the air between us. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. Then don't come back, it said. Stay upstairs. Nail your warnings to the walls. See if it makes a difference. The worst part was, it almost sounded sincere. I stood up. My legs tingled like they'd been asleep. Pins and needles chased each other from my hips to my boots. The stone underfoot felt more solid than anything else in my life. I kept my eyes fixed on the corridor for one last heartbeat, then turned, careful, to the stairs. I didn't look at the thing in the other chair. I could feel it looking at me. Not angrily, not sadly, just watching. See you soon, it said. I didn't answer. The climb up was longer than any I remembered, even though my phone would later insist it took under 5 minutes. My thighs burned on step after step, lungs dragging in cold air that scraped. Once, the light flickered, and in that fraction of not light, I felt the weight of the stone above me and had to clamp down on a scream. When I hauled myself over the lip into the kitchen, my arms shook. I lay there on the floor for a second, chest heaving, respirator fogged. The breathing under the house was muffled from up here, but still present. A low, steady backdrop. The whole glowed softer now, like it had gotten what it wanted for the moment. I pushed to my feet, stripped off the respirator, and staggered back down the hallway. In the living room, pale light seeped in around the curtains. It took my brain a second to place the angle of it. Late afternoon. Again, my phone said 5:09 p.m. To me, it felt like I'd been gone an hour, and also like I'd lived a week down there. Back in the trailer, my laptop sat on the table where I'd left it, lid closed. When I opened it, the document I'd started was still up. The last sentence ended midway through a word, exactly where I remembered stopping. Next? I stared at that question mark for a long time. Then I started typing. The words came easier this time. Less like confession, more like transcription. I wrote what I remembered of the conversation in the chairs, even though the thing downstairs had never said, "Hey, be sure to quote me accurately." I wrote about the corridor, the sense of something endless just around the bend. Every now and then, my fingers hesitated over certain phrases, like I'd hit a soft spot in my brain. Each time, the breathing seemed to deepen until I forced myself through. Once I looked up and realized it was pitch black outside. I checked the time, 3:12 a.m. My eyes burned, my back ached. I hadn't moved in hours. In the silence between keystrokes, I heard something new. Not breathing, not footsteps, not scraping, typing, not the same rhythm as mine. Slower, a beat off, like someone was sitting in another room, tapping on a keyboard just slightly out of sync with me. I stopped. The phantom typing stopped a heartbeat later. "Cute," I said, because if I didn't make it a joke, I was going to panic. I put my hands back on the keys. I kept writing. At some point, I realized the breathing wasn't just under the floor anymore. It was behind the screen, in the plastic keys, in the whine of the hard drive. I thought about closing the laptop. The idea made my hands hurt. Instead, I finished the sentence I was on, saved the file, and for the first time since this started, I opened a browser window. My hotspot connection flickered, slow and unreliable. Bars rose and fell, little spinning wheels. The world outside my field of soybeans and stone felt further away than it had ever been. I navigated to a place I knew people read weird stories. You'd know it if I named it. Let's just say you're probably familiar with the color scheme. I made a post. Title, body, the whole thing. Everything you've just heard, more or less. I watched the cursor blink over the submit button for a long time. When I finally clicked, the page lagged. Timed out once. Reloaded. Hung for a second like it was thinking. Then it posted. No fanfare. Just my words sitting there, bare and stupid, waiting for strangers to scroll past them. Almost immediately, the breathing changed. It slowed. Not by much. Just enough that the exhale stretched a little longer. The inhale started a little later. Like somebody who's just settled into a more comfortable position. Out in the dark, the house creaked once. I sat there in the glow of the laptop screen, feeling like I'd just thrown a rock into a bottomless well and was waiting to hear if it hit anything. I must have dozed sitting up. My head jerked at some point, and my neck throbbed like I'd slept wrong. The laptop had dimmed itself. On the screen, I could see the reflection of the trailer door behind me, the outline of the window, my own head in silhouette, and behind my head, for one breath-long moment, another shape, taller, leaning in as if reading over my shoulder. The next blink, it was gone. The breathing under the property resumed its old pace. I turned around slowly. The trailer was empty. The door was still locked. The window showed only black. "Right?" I said to the emptiness. Rude. I went back to the post I'd made. There were comments. A few anyway. Timestamps that made no sense. Some from minutes ago, some from hours. One marked as 1 day old, even though I hadn't slept yet. People calling me a liar. People saying fake but fun. Someone saying, "You should move, dude." One person saying, "Pretty sure I know that house. My uncle used to drive past it on the way to work, lol." I replied to none of them. I just sat there, watching words from outside drip into my world and disappear like they'd hit the surface of something thick. You might be one of those commenters by the time you hear this. You might be somebody who reads this way later, after the thread's gone cold and buried under other stories about other stupid people who opened the wrong door. Maybe the house will already be listed again. Maybe the bank will decide the land value's worth more without the structure and level it. Maybe they'll fill the hole with concrete. Won't matter. The crawl space isn't the hole. It's just a mouth. You don't kill something like that by pulling its teeth. I've stopped trying to leave, if you're wondering. Not because it told me not to, not exactly. Because every time I walk toward the road now, the sag in the gravel gets worse. The dirt by the ditch has started to crack in long, radiating lines like dry skin around a wound. When I stand there long enough, the breathing syncs up with my heart and I can feel both in my feet. I could push past that. I could force myself to keep walking to test whether the whole county's hollow. But the truth is, I don't care about getting out as much as I care about what happens after me. That sounds noble. It isn't. It's selfish in its own way. I don't want anyone else down there in my chair. So here's the part where I stop talking to myself and talk to you. If you see a listing for an old farmhouse 7 miles outside Crofton, Ohio, just off Route 7, with tons of potential and solid bones, keep scrolling. If your buddy at work mentions picking up a cheap place at a tax auction out that way, used to belong to some guy named Mackin, change the subject. Or don't. Just don't go help him renovate for a weekend. If you're local, if you grew up in Crofton and you're thinking, man, that's the place we always dared each other to break into when we were kids, maybe I'll go take a look for old time's sake, don't. I'm serious. You'll tell yourself you're just curious. You'll tell yourself you're only going to look in the windows, maybe peek in the front door. Just a quick thrill. You got a flashlight. You're careful. But people like us, we see a sagging floor, we want to know why. We see a hatch, we want to pry it up. We hear something breathing under our feet. We want to lean closer and listen. We're the worst kind of dumb. The shell will change hands. That's inevitable. Maybe the county will condemn it. Maybe some out-of-state investor will buy its sight unseen, like I did. Maybe they'll knock it down and build something soulless and boxy with good insulation and vinyl windows and an HOA. The hatch might move. The shape of the mouth might change. The thing underneath won't. It'll keep answering questions with space. It'll keep stretching time around people who open it. It'll keep showing them their things where their things shouldn't be, until they can't tell which side they live on anymore. I don't know how long I've been sitting here writing this. My laptop battery icon says 62%. It said 62% for a while. Might say 62% forever. That's not how batteries work, but there's a lot about this situation that doesn't care how anything works. I can hear the breathing through the walls as I type. Every now and then, when I pause too long on a sentence, something taps under the trailer like fingers impatient on a table. The hatch in the hallway closet, yeah, it's still there. The last time I went in the house, it was wide open. I didn't open it. The edges of the opening were lined with something dark and glossy, like the boards had grown a lip. I didn't look too close. I know, in that gross, intimate way, you know someone you've lived with too long, that if I go back down, the chairs will be waiting. Maybe the corridor will be longer. Maybe there'll be a new room with my laptop in it, screen glowing, keys depressed by invisible fingers. I know I will go back down. I'm not saying that for drama. I'm saying it because every hour I sit up here, the pull gets stronger. Curiosity hasn't killed me yet, but it's got its hand around my ankle. I don't think this ends with me walking away. I don't think there's a version of this story where I tell you about the nice apartment I got in Dayton after I put that weird old house behind me. I think it ends with me in that chair, eventually facing the corridor, watching something come up instead of down. Maybe that's why it likes people like me. We're good at sitting in half-ruined places and imagining how they could be. If you're listening to this and you feel that little tickle in your brain, that'd be cool to see for myself. Do me a favor. Remember that the part of you that wants to look is the part it's calling to. Remember that I'm not special. I'm just ahead of you in line. If you know the Mackin property by sight, if you can picture the place I'm talking about, burn that image out of your head. Shift the mental landmark somewhere else. Tell yourself the county paved over that road, that the fields got sold for development, that the house collapsed years ago. Lie to yourself if you have to, because sure, the floor might sag for reasons you can fix. The crawl space might just be a crawl space. The breathing might just be your own pulse. Or the space under your feet might be deeper than the survey says. It might be listening for you. And if you open it, it'll grow. It always grows. Under the Mackin place. Under Crofton. Under your house. Under every flat, friendly stretch of ground you've ever assumed was just there. You don't own it. You're standing on its chest. If you ever find yourself in a quiet hallway, staring at a hatch in the floor that smells like a cave and old batteries, this is the part 1-1 embedded in your head. You don't have to open it. You don't owe the darkness anything. Walk away. Seal it shut. Nail a bookcase over it. Fill it with concrete if you can. Sell the goddamn house and never come back. If you don't, if you go down there just to see, if you feel the rock steps under your boots and the temperature drop sliding into your bones, remember my name. Remember I was here first. Remember there's already a chair with my shape worn into it. I can hear it now, the thing below breathing my name like a tide. Each exhale brushes the edge of my mind. Dean, N-I-S. Dean, N-I-S. And underneath that, a new sound I don't like at all. The faint scrape of another chair leg on stone being pulled into place. One for me, one for whoever comes next. So if you ever come across a certain listing for an old farmhouse with some floor issues outside a small Ohio town, don't be tempted. Don't walk up on that porch. Don't test the kitchen floor. Don't open the hatch in the hallway closet. The crawl space is still growing, and I don't think it stops.